Step into realms where the heart takes flight, where strategy meets the edge of night. The Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. Prepare your mind. Now be our guest.
Hello, Cyclithids, and welcome to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. I am your host, Robert Walker, and in today's session, I'm joined by Keisha Lundgren and Keisha Mayer-Gawlik from Potions and Potpourri. Welcome to the show, you two wonderful people.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So I've listened to quite a bit of your show, and I would have to say it's one of the most, let's call it carefree is a great word to use for your show, because it's filled with laughter and just all sorts of kind of off-the-wall ideas and kind of fun, kooky moments. Your live question session that you had a couple of weeks ago was a lot of fun, too. So it's really obvious in your show that you love the game and you love the community. And so I'm just kind of interested, what first got you into the role-playing community? What got you introduced to it?
That's really sweet to say, first of all. Thank you for that.
Normally I would go with unscripted, but carefree, it's a much better word.
I'll have to put that in our bio now.
Yeah.
I'll start. Kayla here. Honestly, what got me into Dungeons and Dragons specifically is probably Stranger Things in 2017 when it became popular. I just have a general background of liking nerdy things, sci-fi, fantasy, that sort of stuff. And I'd always kind of wanted to try D&D, but I never knew enough about it or had people around me that could introduce me. And then Stranger Things took off and made D&D like really present and really available to people. And then I finally found some friends that were like, let's play. And we've been doing it ever since. Dragged Keisha along with me, and now here we are.
Yay.
I definitely think that show was instrumental in helping small groups find more people who wanted to try it out. Absolutely.
Oh, totally.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 100%. Yeah, for me specifically, I mean, if I had access or known about D&D, like when I came out the womb, I would have been playing right then and there. It was just the same situation of just like where I live, you know, just nobody played it. I didn't even know about it until literally, like, basically when Kayla pulled me into her game. I've always been a nerd, you know. I grew up watching all kinds of anime, reading manga, playing all the video games. You know, my friends and I would role play without really knowing what that was.
Yeah.
Like, we would out in the play yard just be like, oh, we'll be characters from our favorite show, or create characters and implement them in the show. Or we would have notebooks and write out our character information and then take turns in between classes, like writing what they do and stuff, pass it to each other, and then they would react by writing it out. And so I was ready to be, you know,
Yeah, you were primed for it,
into-
for sure.
I think that's pretty similar. I mean, I've been playing for quite a while now, 25 years ago when I actually started D&D, but before that, I was definitely playing a lot of those sort of role-playing-esque scenarios with my siblings and with my friends. We would do like the pretend we're a Power Ranger or one of the characters from He-Man and She-Ra and fighting the monsters while we do flips on the trampoline and make really cool fighting moves and things like that. So I definitely get that. So when you play, do you get the opportunity to be both a player and a DM, either one of you, or is one of you kind of mostly in one of those roles?
I'll go first again, Kayla again. I'm basically a forever player.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I am Keisha's forever player. Keisha's been my DM in many games over the last 3 years. I've, like, metaphorically dipped my toe into the DM pool a few times and found it really difficult. Of course, now that I've played D&D more and I've kind of learned more about the game and the rules, I feel like it'd be a little bit easier, but I really like playing, so I've only done a few things myself as far as DMing goes.
Yep, and for me, I'm becoming a forever DM,
Yep.
you know. By the third or fourth session that you brought me into that game so long ago, I was like, I need the control. I need to do the voice. I need more than one character. Oh my god!
Yes. So in my group, I have the opportunity to do both about half and half, because we do have a good group that has a number of DMs. We all like to take turns. But I do think my most enjoyed moments come from behind the DM screen. It really is where I feel like I shine. I don't know if it's because I like acting or I just like all the attention being on me. Who knows? But it's I think my favorite place to be, even though I don't get stuck there, and I always have the opportunity to take that break. So as a player, do you have any favorite moments? Or as a DM, do you have any favorite moments that really stand out to you as like, oh, this is like why I love role playing so much?
You want to go first this time?
Sure. I mean, I definitely have a handful of them. Honestly, the one that came first to mind is I wasn't really even involved in it at all. I was DMing this game, and it's towards the end of it, you know, and I'm just watching my players, you know, trying to make these final decisions. You know, it's a final battle. There's all kinds of things happening, and they're all kind of disagreeing with each other on what they want to do, how they want to go about it. And then there's some inter-party conflict. And then two of my players specifically, like completely in character, got in this full-on fight. Like it took it was like 10 minutes, I swear, of them just back and forth and yelling at each other and how dare you and all of this stuff and everything. And it was just so well done because they were so into it. And that's one of my favorite things personally, is when everyone at the table is just so immersed, you know, and like afterwards, of course, when they're done with the fight, they like looked at each other like, you good? Yeah. You good? We're good. You know, get off. We're fine. It's just, you know, the players or the characters.
It can be really hard sometimes to separate in character arguments from out of character, you know, friendships. But it's really beautiful when it works. I have had some moments like that where I could swear a player was really upset, like shaking in rage as they play their character. But then the in-character part of it's over and there's like, oh yeah, I was just playing the character. I'm like, okay, great. That's awesome.
Yep.
And how about as a player?
It's hard for me to pick something like really specific, but I think kind of a broader scope idea is a little more recently. I think because Keisha has been my DM for so long, I'm like really understanding her style. But I've noticed lately that as a player, it's been really fun for me to kind of try and solve her puzzles and traps.
Yes.
Because I'm like 90% certain that every time I say an answer that she really likes, that's going to be the right answer because she probably doesn't already have one picked. So me as a player, I'm like, the gears are grinding in my head, right? I'm like, okay, what's something really cool to solve this puzzle that Keisha would accept as the answer?
I've
and
definitely
let me be the one to decide.
Definitely taken that approach as a DM before. Like, I'm going to throw this out there and see what's the most cool thing they can come up with. And that's the one that'll be that's a great. So tell me, before we go into our main topic, just a little bit for my listeners about your show. You know, what got you interested in wanting to do a podcast in the first place, and kind of what keeps you going on that?
Yeah, getting us started was kind of just inspiration from a friend who has a podcast. And it's kind of funny because Keisha was like, hey, our friend has this podcast. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I'm just sitting here at work to myself like, man, what would I talk about if I had a podcast? I just really wish I could talk about D&D more. So I'm literally texting Keisha like, I mean, would it be crazy to like have a D&D podcast? And Keisha was like, oh my God, I was literally just thinking the same thing.
Yes.
And I was like, were you really? And she was like, yes. I just thought it would be really weird to say. And so long story short, we met up and had an actual like serious conversation about, you know, spending money on equipment, putting in work to make content, having a social media following, and just kind of decided our parameters and went from there. But I think some of the best advice we got was to not pigeonhole ourselves right away because we couldn't decide what to talk about. And so that's kind of how we've been consistently a just general chat podcast about D&D, and it's kind of has that nice casual flair.
It's pretty cool because I think in some ways that might have helped you guys find your voice for the podcast, because it is a unique flavor. It does have, like I said, that carefree feel about it. And whereas, I feel sometimes I feel a little bit pigeonholed, maybe a little too formal in the way that my structure has been set up from the beginning. But yours is just sort of like a breath of fresh air where I can listen to it and just like, there's all this laughter and having so much fun, and that just feels really cool. So I really like that about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
We did that on purpose.
Yep.
Well, whether you did or not, it works. I like it. So let's move into our main topic today, which is talking about homebrew NPCs. And in that, there's so many different places to get inspiration from creating NPCs. I know for myself, when I am looking at creating a new NPC, generally the idea comes from some sort of media I'm consuming, watching TV shows or reading a book or something. There's just a really interesting side character. And so I think for me, that's like one of the key places that I draw from. But do you have any different areas or anything else that you like to draw from?
I mean, that's definitely one of them for sure for me. Sometimes I might listen to a certain kind of music, and that kind of gives me a general idea of like the feel of this person,
Okay.
Whether they're like dark and moody and emo or just so like, that kind of a thing, or they're like super happy and bouncy and like all over the place, maybe a little annoying,
Right.
And sometimes obviously I like to do voices. Sometimes I will literally, as I'm like driving home or to work or something, I will just like talk to myself out loud in just the weirdest voices, and then that kind of becomes a person as I'm just talking to myself.
Okay. I will confess, I have 100% done this 1,000 times. There is something about driving alone in the car where you hear something or you just think something, and then all of a sudden you're doing a voice and you're saying all these things that an NPC would say. It is definitely one of my greatest soundboards to come up with a cool character is alone in my car while I'm driving. Absolutely agree with that point.
Don't you think it makes it easier for you to do that voice in the moment, so it's not like the first time that you've done it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think being alone in the car is one of those true places where you're actually alone, so you kind of feel free to just like let loose and be a dork and maybe make some mistakes with the voice and really find out what it's supposed to sound like for you. But yeah, I think so that's a good trick of the trade for anyone listening. If you're struggling to find a voice for your NPC, just talk to yourself alone in the car. That's a great place to do it. So do you have any favorite NPCs that you've created or that you've interacted with? Like, are there any that really stand out as like the coolest NPC of all times?
I think for us, one of them that we talk about a lot on our show too is Skeevy Skid. Skeevy Skid is an NPC that was born in the moment of roleplay with Keisha DMing a very specific part of one of our sessions.
Yeah.
He wasn't planned. He had no purpose in the story other than our party wanted to buy some drugs for a gathering. And
Awesome.
Keisha was not prepared for that and didn't even know what to call him. So he became Skeevy Skid on Third Row Street.
Yeah. Because precious little Keisha, in my head, I'm like, okay, oh man, okay, we gotta come up with something. Skeevy. Okay, first name Skeevy. Great. What's his full name? I don't know. I've heard about this thing called Skid Row.
Yep.
Don't know what that is. Don't know what it's about. That sounds right. Sure, Skeevy Skid on Third Row Street. Let's throw it in there. Here we go. It's fine.
He just became
That
a
is
pivotal
awesome.
character for a short time. He ended up being a mini boss that we fought a few sessions later.
Yeah.
It's just totally random.
Yeah.
So then let me ask the DM, because this is something I always find hilarious, and I don't know why it is, but why is it always that the NPC that you didn't plan to be important always ends up being the one that the players fall in love with?
So true.
It's because it's just it's so randomly pulled, and it's kind of obvious, I feel like, to everybody when you are just like panicking a little bit and you just kind of a character. And you know, it's born from a moment, and everyone's going to remember that moment, you know, and the character molded from that. You didn't have time to have a backstory. You're thinking on the fly. You're coming up with names, and you put on the weirdest voice you never intended to come out. But now it's too late. This is what they sound like.
Yep.
And that is memorable.
I think those are some great points, but it always astounds me. Like, I can put all this work into really great NPCs and wonderful backstories, and then it's just, you know, the one weird like tavern owner or person down an alley that they bump into and end up like adopting into the party, or, you know, forever.
Exactly. I've literally had at least 2 characters that had complete backgrounds, were pivotal to the story. I introduce them to these bozos, and they decide to almost murder them, but not quite, and then throw them in a bag of holding and forget about them for the rest of the game.
Oh no.
Just like, cool. Well, that was a waste of creation.
So they adopt the PC that you didn't have planned, and they throw away the one that you did. That's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds about like every classic NPC encounter ever. Is there anything either of you would suggest to not do when it comes to creating NPCs, or anything maybe that you would note should be done with caution? Like, I know there's a lot of, I mean, we can all admit that there's a lot of problems that have existed early on in Dungeons and Dragons, and they've done a good job, I think, of correcting some of that in recent years. But, you know, like Drow's one that I talk about a lot. There's been a lot of, you know, corrections on the Drow. And yet a lot of my early stories, you know, 20 years ago, centered around that sort of society. But nowadays, I think, you know, is there anything that you think should really be looked out for? Or is it something that should just be decided early on in like session 0, things like that? What are your thoughts on that sort of thing?
I think, yes, you should know where you're coming from with a session 0 as a group, for sure. I think
100%.
That's kind of just a blanket statement in general. So everybody's on the same page. But I think more specifically, as far as creating NPCs, what I would suggest would just be try and stay away from stereotypes. They're often more harmful than anything. You know, if you're trying to describe a certain type of person or like a certain type of accent or something, have it be because that's where people in Estonia, that's what they do, not because this is this specific class or race or type of person.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I mean, being a DM, there's a few times where it's kind of fun to play with, you know, certain kinds of stereotypes that are like this silly, like, oh, this is a silly blonde, ha ha ha, so funny, you know, something pretty, I don't know what the word is, maybe gentle about that kind of a thing, but obviously tread very carefully and don't use it all the time, all across the board for all of the blondes, etc., you know. And definitely feel free to like diversify your characters, make them all different, you know, and not only in just like, you know, like personality and appearance and the way that they present themselves, you know, just like have every single one wildly different from each other, you know. It really helps the game have more life instead of having just this standard like it's another elf, that one's also an elf. Elves are everywhere, you know, like, you know, like just dabble in a little bit of everything and have fun with it, and don't get stuck with one idea of what one type or whatever should be. And all of them are like that, you know, because they're all people too. They're all going to be as diverse as
I think that's all very, very good advice. I know one for myself, one thing you mentioned voices earlier. Voices are also something I love to do when I'm DMing, especially if it's an important NPC or I'm really trying to set a mood for a certain type of character. I love to do voices. And so early on in my gaming career, I tried to learn as many different accents as I could. Although now I've found that maybe a better way to approach that, because I I think I foolishly attached certain accents to certain races in the game. We've seen that in media, dwarves are also often given a Scottish or an Irish accent, because they were obviously early on pulled from that area of the world, the concept. But now I think instead what I try and do is, I heard a great piece of advice was that really bad impersonations make really great characters.
Yeah.
So
I heard that too.
Yeah. So instead of trying to pull from a specific nationality or accent in that way, I try and think of maybe a specific character from a show or something like that and mimic their voice instead. I think that's maybe a little more gentle on following that sort of a path.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. That's a great idea.
Awesome. Well, do you have any other pointers about NPCs when you come to writing them or when you come to interacting with them before we move on to our last segment?
I would say, when you have DM'd a little bit, what have you kind of thought up for trying to make like any kind of characters and such?
I've been fortunate that I haven't been put on the spot too hard as far as having to make up an NPC on the fly, but I think some good advice.
That's very lucky.
I know, but I haven't DM'd enough, so But I think good advice is to have like a list of names and or a list of traits available that you can just kind of pull from or roll dice on and just be prepared to make something up. So that way your brain doesn't suddenly like go, duh.
Yep. Well, let me ask you one more question on that, which is organization with NPCs is very important, and that's a great point. Do you have any particular methods of keeping track of your NPCs or your session notes that might be useful to the listeners?
We'll be right back.
Hey, Cyclithids, if you love the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology podcast and want to help keep it alive, there are a ton of ways you can support the show. Join us on Patreon for exclusive content like NPC character sheets, early access to new products, and even first looks at DM's Assistant app. You can also grab gaming-inspired merch on the Etsy shop, Games for Games, or pick up one of my books, The Player's Handbook to Real Life, or Session Zero, the DMG to Writing Great Campaigns in any system. And even if financial support isn't in the cards for you, you can still help by sharing the show, leaving reviews, or introducing new players to our community. Links are always in the show notes, and thank you for being the heart of our adventure.
Sure. I have my notebooks that I keep. I'll jot down what happens during every session, and then whenever a character, if it's on the fly or already pre-made it, I make sure I have like a very specific area in my notebook that lists out the NPCs. I personally don't have like necessarily a specific order. I know that the ones that are major to the plot, maybe like certain main NPCs I know they're going to encounter at some point that will be very instrumental in the overarching story. They're the first ones I write down, I flesh out, I make sure I have the backgrounds, I might write little notes of like silly voice or deep voice or really annoying, like little tidbits to help me remember what that person's like.
Right.
So I think it's good just to make sure you have, whether it's a notebook or if you have note cards, might be kind of nice too.
Yeah.
To just jot down whatever you need to remind yourself what that person's like, and maybe like a brief, like what their relationship is with the players, whether it's good, bad, neutral, enemy, friend,
Right. That's a great point. I think one of the things I've gotten in the habit now of doing is when it comes to like remembering how they're supposed to sound or how they're supposed to act, like I said, correlating it as a bad impression of a specific character. So like instead of a voice, like early on, I used to write down, oh, this is an English accent, right? But then, of course, I've got like 8 or 9 different dialects of English accent that I would use, so I still kind of forget which one they were. But if instead I'm saying like, okay, this is, this character from this specific film, and then I know, oh, okay, I have to do that impersonation, it's going to sound the same every time they come interact with this NPC. So,
that's really smart. Yeah.
I just think it's a little easier than the kind of umbrella it sounds in this genre of sound. It gets you a little more consistent with the voice of the NPC.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so let's move on to tricks of the trade. Okay, in today's Tricks of the Trade, I have asked Kayla and Keisha to each come up with one idea for an NPC or a personality trait of an NPC that you can go ahead and drop into your world and your campaign if you so choose. I've also come up with one for myself. I will go ahead and go first. And I think an interesting one would be perhaps it's a shopkeep or a tavern owner or some merchant of some sort that every time the party comes to trade with this person, they give them good prices, but they have like an aversion to anything that the party has touched because they're afraid of magical contamination. So they just sort of require everything to be thoroughly disinfected from magic before they can do any trade or business. And I just think it would be sort of an interesting, quirky character to play with.
Yeah, definitely. Are we making up entirely new ones, or can we suggest maybe
whatever you want, whatever comes to mind?
Okay. This one could be very enjoyable. It is a character that maybe they encounter and they can't get a read on. This person's maybe a little kooky, maybe a little too interested in what they're doing, and they have an interaction, whatever, and it's kind of weird. They walk away, and then maybe a little bit later, that person just magically appears out of nowhere. You open up your cloak, there he is. You take off your hat, there he is. You turn the corner, there he is, hanging upside down from the sign. Like, he's just always there when you least expect it, and always has, like, really random information to give you. You have no idea where he got it from, why he's helping, and then just always like disappears. Like, you look in the cloak again, he's gone. Like, how did
like the little Houdini?
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, precisely.
That's fun.
Tiny little magician.
I like both of those, honestly. Something I was thinking about is to maybe add a little bit of inter-party conflict, or even like party versus NPC conflict. Maybe you have a NPC that your party needs to visit often, whether it's for the next part of the quest or to trade items or for information, but that NPC really, really dislikes one of the people in your party. And you're not really sure why. And you kind of have to spend the time figuring it out to be able to actually get that information, or be able to trade those items, or be able to do what you need to do from this important NPC to kind of rectify the situation. You just keep causing problems every time you visit.
That's really fun. So that actually reminds me of a game I was playing in recently, and my character, Mike, he was an angel, half elf, like half angel, Aasimar type character, and he spoke with a lisp, and the store owner would never have anything in stock that he was looking for. So I ended up eventually finding out that the DM had made this character homophobic. So, and because I spoke with a lisp, he thought my character was full on gay, which, he was, but that's not the point. But so we had to go on this interesting, like, redeem the shopkeeper and make him comfortable with my character's sexuality so that they could finally do business together. It was a really interesting arc.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. It was an interesting thing that it was cool for me to play with in a game, because it gave me the opportunity to be in someone else's shoes that I don't normally have the opportunity to be in. Right. Yeah. As a middle-aged white heterosexual male, I don't really ever have to deal with anything like that in my own personal life. But one of the things I do love about role-playing is it gives you the opportunity to see life and experience life, even in brief snippets from other people's point of view. And I think that's why psychology and role-play are so intertwined, because it gives you just the chance to experience a different life that you don't really know. And
yeah, I agree about that. And that's what I really enjoy about your show too, is you do touch on a lot of that sort of stuff with psychology being important to role-playing, and it's just been really interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I really do believe for me, it's almost like therapy every time I go to game, because it does give me the opportunity to just experience things in a very safe place. And I think that's the beautiful thing about it.
You get to have real emotions.
Yeah, you really do. Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's sort of like practicing for difficult experiences in your real life. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Before we go, I want to give you the opportunity to share with my listeners how they can get in touch with you, how they can listen to your show, and any new projects or anything you've got going on. So just take a moment and share anything you'd like with them. I'm sure they would be happy to check you out once you let them know where to.
Yeah. So you can find Potions and Potpourri pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. We're on all streaming platforms. We have a pretty active Instagram account. We're also on TikTok. We post a lot of videos, not necessarily related to the show, but related to D&D and role-playing in general. And we also like to do collabs with some of our podcast friends on Twitch. Keisha is in a live game on Fridays that I'll let her tell you guys about.
It is called Fixius 5. Again, it's on Twitch on the Voctaire channel. And it's just a fun little group. And I mean, talking about emotions, like that is the most emotional roller coaster D&D game I've ever been a part of. So if that is your thing, definitely check it out. We go through all of them. Yep, all the time.
That's our pretty consistent project. And I will be playing in our friend Cantrips and Coffee's live game of Spelljammer when it comes out in September.
Very excited. Yeah, I'm excited for the space hamsters and the space whales. Some of the art for those is so cool.
Our friend's probably going to get to wild shape as a druid into a giant hamster. So
awesome.
Really excited about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being here with me today. This was a lot of fun. Cyclothids, if you like this episode, please check out Potions and Potpourri. I will put a link to it in the show notes. And also, please subscribe to this podcast and check out my book, Session Zero, The DMG to Writing Great Campaigns in Any System. It is available on Amazon, and there's a link in the show notes. Feel free to send me an email if you have any suggestions, comments, ideas for future shows, or any commentary on this episode. The address is all one word, dungeonsdragonpsychology@gmail.com. And as always, my cyclothids, see you next session.